We're just 8 weeks away from the presidential election, which means now more than ever, it's time to familiarize ourselves with some of the top issues facing our country. We're speaking with Senator James Lankford to shed some light on some of the problems and discussions he's partaking in up in Washington. Senator Lankford, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be able to visit with you.
Absolutely. And right now, a trending topic is not necessarily right here for Texoma area, but as a country is the Zika virus and why more funding isn't coming from Washington. Can you talk a little bit about this? And in your opinion, should there even be funding going to Florida for Zika from Washington?
Yeah, Zika is really a national issue as well, but it's been very, very confusing. Last February, the president asked for some dollars for Zika. Congress had allocated $500 million for what's called the infectious diseases account that the president could use for Zika. He asked for that in February, got it, and then in March he used that $500 million to send to the UN for the Green Climate Fund. And then he came back to Congress again and said, no, I need more money now. And so there was money that was also allocated, what's called reprograms, $670 million for the president to use. And he has spent about $120 million of that so far, so he has $500 million still left in that account. But he has come back to Congress and said, no, I need another billion on top of that. So my frustration has been $1 billion has already been either allocated or reprogrammed to the Obama administration. $500 million of that they sent to the UN for the Green Climate Fund. Another $500 million sits unspent, and they're highlighting one area where they need more money, and that's the CDC. They have funds for other areas. They're literally not spending right now. So it's been a lot of frustration in trying to get what is the real number. It's easy to say we need more money. It's more challenging when you actually do the oversight and see how they're spending the money or if they're spending the money at all. Some areas are overfunded. Some areas they may need to have some other reprogramming on. But we're not getting the real skinny on these issues from the administration. I'm trying to get the actual facts and figures.
And from what you're saying, just not spending or using it wisely.
Well, one of the key issues is they have $500 million that's already been reprogrammed for Zika, and they're not spending those dollars. They're literally holding back on it, saying, no, we need another $1 billion, and we're trying to figure out what they're using that money for. We shouldn't just allocate money to the administration, and then they tell us later how they're going to use it. That's already happened once, where they took $500 million and reallocated it to the UN and didn't spend it on Zika. So we have a real concern just allocating more money to this administration. That's where they very well could reprogram and use it for things that are not Zika directed, especially when they already have Zika funds in place that they're currently not spending.
I see. So hopefully that can move forward in the right direction. Switching gears here a little bit, let's talk about national security and, our economy. We're seeing many Texomans in Oklahoma and Texas continuing to back Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton, and we've seen the ups and downs from the campaign on both candidates. But we wanted to know your opinion with an overall umbrella covering, safety, prosperity of the country. Just in general, who do you think is the best candidate for the country? Is Trump's wall viable, or can the people of America trust Hillary Clinton?
Sure, that is the part that actually Americans are settling right now. On November the 8th, they're going to determine who do they actually trust to be able to lead us in some of these key issues related to national security. The challenge is Hillary Clinton is currently having to explain why she can't handle the most basic issues, and that is email security. Her email server is relevant because it affects how she thinks other nations are viewing us, the intelligence community, what are threats to our nation's security, whether that be Benghazi, and the lack of security that was provided there for State Department personnel when there was clearly the decision that was made on the Secretary of State's desk about how security would be handled for those facilities, because there's only 12 facilities in the world that have to have checkoffs directly from the Secretary of State. And of those 12 facilities that are in the world that have to have a checkoff from the Secretary of State, Benghazi was one of those 12 facilities that required that. So it's one of those things that you look at and say, security's already been handled that way. We see all the issues that happen with the email server and national security. Those are just telling signs of how any administration would take this on. Now, there's obviously a lot of generals that are very supportive of Donald Trump. They've come out very publicly for that. There are other individuals that are obviously supportive of Hillary Clinton. American people will settle this in days ahead. I've settled how I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. When I look at things like the Supreme Court and how we handle the seriousness of Americans' position in the world and what direction we're going to take the country, I think he has a better direction, a better vision for that, and more consistent with where we've been historically in our law.
I see. Okay. Um, Lastly, finally, I wanted to ask you about the $1.7 billion payment to Iran. I know you were against originally last year the Iran nuclear agreement. You'd voiced your opinion a number of times on the floor. And is this payment essentially another deal with Iran, or what exactly is the payment for? I know President Obama had said that it was money that we owed to them, but there was still a lot of gray area that I know many people just don't know, I guess, the fine tunings of what it was for.
Sure. So in 1979, when the Shah was leading Iran, the United States had a relationship with Iran. Iran was a very different country at that time than what it is now. We had an ongoing relationship with them. Iran was buying airline parts from the United States. They had sent $400 million for those airline parts. We had not sent the parts back to Iran yet when the Ayatollahs took over Iran and kicked out the Shah and dramatically changed the government in the direction of Iran. Okay. Every president since 1979, since Jimmy Carter, has not recognized the legitimacy of the Ayatollahs and has not returned that $400 million. We've kept it in a separate account, in a defense account. What President Obama did is he actually sent them that $400 million back, plus interest payments that he declared of $1.3 billion, a total of $1.7 billion in cash that he sent to the Ayatollahs, and said that this is now money and we want our hostages back. Now, he says it's not connected to that, but he has also said it was leverage to be able to get our hostages back. So he's saying we weren't paying for our hostages, but we were using that money as leverage, and the president has said that was their money anyway, we might as well give it back. The hard part is no president has recognized the legitimacy of the Ayatollahs. This would be something akin to saying we had a disagreement with North Korea, and so we just sent $1.7 billion to Kim Jong-un, assuming that they're going to use the funds well. Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. There is no question. In fact, Iran has made it very, very clear that they're using that $1.7 billion for their military purposes, not for anything else. So it goes to Hezbollah, it goes to all the undergirding of the coup that's in Yemen, it goes to funding Bashar Assad in Syria. That's what they'll use that money for, and we didn't just send them in a wire transfer that could be traced. We literally sent 3 plane loads of cash over to the Ayatollahs and gave them that money, and they sent us back 4 hostages.
Wow. Do you think making that kind of a deal is a bit of a slippery slope when it comes to countries that we don't have this incredible relationship with, like a lot of the other ones?
I think the hardest part about it is that it's clear that the United States just paid for hostages. So every American that travels internationally that ends up in any location that they want to be able to take one of those Americans hostages, that then those governments can now say, you paid Iran $1.7 billion for some of your American citizens. Now it's time you pay us for some of yours. It puts the future of Americans traveling for business or vacation or whatever it may be at risk, and that's the biggest challenge.
The only other question I had was there anything else that you kind of wanted to add to the conversation that you wanted the people of Texoma, Oklahoma, Texas, just to keep in mind, especially as this next year starts and this very important election comes up?
Sure, yeah. This is a vital election. It has to resolve a lot of issues that we have to deal with as a nation. Budget issues, what's going to happen with our debt and deficit, structure, Supreme Court will be a really big issue because the direction of how the nation will handle legal issues will be determined by this election, because whoever replaces Justice Scalia will determine the direction of the country for decades to come. So it's a very important election based on just the direction not only of the presidency and the agencies and what happens in our regulatory world, but also through the direction of the Supreme Court. And we have a lot of issues right now that still have to be resolved this year based on budgeting. The two parties have a real disagreement whether we should balance our budget or whether we should overspend. As Democrats have been very outspoken to say that we need to overspend our budget to try to stimulate the economy, and Republicans like myself and others have said the reason our economy is struggling, one of those reasons is because of the overspending of the federal government. We've got to be able to get us back to balance. That will be resolved in that big argument during this next presidential election, which direction we go, how much additional debt that we will have as a country.
All right, well, it'll be really interesting to see how this election goes. Senator Lankford, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thank you. Glad to be able to do it.
All right, well, we'll be right back after this. Stay with us.